close till I get up. Time is barely on our side.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to International Seminar held to celebrate the 53rd anniversary of the Faculty of Theology, Satyawacana Christian University, with the theme Healing and Empowering towards a healing and empowering religious education in digital era. First of all, let us praise to the Almighty God. Because of God's blessings, we are able to attend this event. My name is Gracia Eunika Mongkol, and I will be the Master of Ceremony for today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to me to inform you that among us here, we have the first one is respectable Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty from Iliff School of Theology, Reverend Dr. Boyong Lee. Welcome. The second one is Honorable Director, Faculty Development Programs, United Board for Christian Higher Education in Asia, Hope Anton, Doctor of Education. Welcome. And the next one is our Honorable Moderator of this international seminar, Reverend Iki Sumartina Putri Prayitno, PhD. Welcome. And last but not least, honorable attendees and participants of this international seminar. We hope that all attendees can participate in this event until the end. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start this session, let's open with the opening prayer. Will be led by Reverend Cindy Kwartiaminakoan. Please welcome Reverend Cindy.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we are truly grateful for the way you take care of us. In the time of the ongoing pandemic, in all challenges, we are still alive and be blessed. Not only the breath of life, but also thanks to meal, health, finances, family, friends, wisdom, knowledge, and other forms of blessings that have forgotten from our list. This morning, we are even more grateful for this international seminar in the series of 53rd anniversary of the Faculty of Theology, Satyawacana Christian University. May your wisdom be upon our speakers, panelists, and moderators as they impart their knowledge to us. May it become a blessing that enlightens, awakens, corrects, and motivates all of us to undertake works of healing and empowering that are in harmony with Christian values for the life in which we are present, especially in the midst of the digital age. We also pray for all offline and online equipment to run well, including for all committees on duty, in order to fulfill their responsibilities optimally until the end of today's activity. Let everything that we will do today give glory to your name alone. This we pray to God Almighty. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Cindy Kwan, for the prayer.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start the session, I will read the rules for today. The first one is all participants must turn on their camera. The second one is questions can be submitted through Zoom chat during the session. And the last one is selected questioners will be invited to ask their question in person during the Q&A session. That's all our rules for today. Now, we are going to start our session this morning. Will be led by our moderator, Reverend Iki Sumartina Putri Prayitno, PhD. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator and speakers.
Thank you, Gracia, and good morning, all the speakers, two of them, the wonderful women of this era and in religious education area. Welcome, Professor Lee and Professor Hope Anton. Good morning. I hope you are all in a very good health condition. And ladies and gentlemen, all the invited guests from schools and also from churches, all of our participants who are students, welcome to this second session of our international seminar today. And I can see in my screen now, Dr. Bo Young Lee is here. So let me greet her because 2 days ago, she was celebrating Lunar New Year. So let me try my Korean, ma'am. 새해 복 많이 받으세요, 교수님. 안녕하세요.
감사합니다.
반갑습니다.
새해 복 많이 받으세요. 드리마카시.
오, 와우, 교수님 반갑습니다.
반갑습니다.
네네, 교수님, 저는 광나루 창노신 학대학 후원 공부했어요. 그러면 저는 한국 조금 알았어요.
감사합니다.
네, 교수님, welcome to our international seminar, and thank you because you will speak for us today, and you will be the first speaker who will speak today. And then let me introduce our Professor Lee. For her education and professional credentials, I received 7 long page of CV. So, but I will shorten it up. She graduated at 2002, PhD, Theology and Education at Boston College. And then also she finished her MDiv in Claremont School of Theology, California, THM at Yonsei University, Seoul, Korea, and then BA at Yonsei University, Seoul, Korea. And then also I can see here in the CV, her ordination, other credential, professional experience. So I will jump into that point. Academic professional experience. She is now Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty and a Professor of Practical Theology, and also co-dean at Iliff University of Denver School of Theology, Colorado. So this the short CV that I can introduce to you all, our dear participant this morning. And then also we have our second speaker here, Dr. Hope, and then she gave us very precise and short, very effective CV that I don't have to resume it all. Dr. Hope, good morning, ma'am. How are you? Okay. Dr. Hope is currently a program director of faculty development at the United Board for Christian Higher Education in Asia. Okay, welcome again, Dr. Hope and Prof. Lee. And then for the effectiveness of the time, I would like to inform you a very short information, and then we can start with Prof. Lee. Prof, according to our limitation of the facility, we are going to do a direct translation, ma'am. I think committee already informed you about it, so just I know you are speak here and there, and then you can adjust yourself. So our translator today is from English department. If I'm wrong, sorry for that. Mrs. Fanny Novita is here. So I hope in the early minutes, Prof. Lee and then later Prof. Hope can adjust themselves well with our interpreter. Yeah, I hope it not be a very big obstacle for us today. And then also, and then teman-teman dalam bahasa Indonesia ketika Ibu Fanny say saya, it means Professor Lee or Professor Hope. Okay, jadi saya itu bukan Ibu Fanny ya, but the speakers ya. She addressed the speaker. Okay, that's all the introduction and short information. And we have our Mrs. Fanny here in the screen also. And then Professor Lee will start our session today. She prepared a very wonderful paper and PPT. I see through it all. I hope it can be a blessing for us today. Professor Lee will present her paper under the theme Trauma Informed, under the title Trauma Informed Religious Education During and Post-Pandemic Times. The times is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Praitino. Shalom pagi, everyone. Indonesia has a part of my heart. One of my best teaching experiences was in Indonesia, 2005 5, I was honored to be invited to teach at Persetia's summer program in Jakarta. And that was, I had the best 64 students for 2 weeks in that class. And I'm also thankful for Dr. Mariska Lauterbom, who facilitated this invitation. And I am also very honored to do this session with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Hope Anton. She is working at the United Board, and I am also on United Board as a trustee. So Hope and I interact with each other on a regular basis for our common work there. So with these things, let me share my screen as I go through my presentation. Okay. Share. Okay. So to talk about trauma-informed approach and pedagogy during and post-pandemic times, let me begin with a story. Not long ago, I had a very heartbreaking conversation with one of my dearest friends, someone I call brother, who is a pastor and a theologian. His 9-year-old granddaughter, who has been known as a child prodigy, genius young child with her intelligence and artistic gifts, is recently diagnosed with a severe anxiety disorder. Whenever her anxiety kicks in, she hides in her bedroom as she does not have any emotional strength to engage even her own family members. When her condition is even more serious, she is physically violent. She is beating up her younger brother, throwing things at people, including her parents, screaming with cursing words and threats of suicide. Remember, she is only a 9-year-old who talks about suicide. Because her panic attacks are not predictable, despite multiple medications she is currently on, an adult supervision for her is required for 24 hours for 7 days a week to make sure of her safety. Her caregivers, including her parents, are now feeling burnt out from physical and emotional exhaustion. Let me stop here. Should I continue? So according to her parents, this beautiful young soul's panic attack symptoms started right after she had to return to school for in-person instruction after almost for 2 years of remote learning at home. Although she has always been a sensitive and a little shy child, she was an excellent student and collaborative student who loved her school and her friends at school. However, having heard people she knew, such as church elders, became seriously ill and died from COVID-19, and also watching news about the seriousness of the COVID-19 pandemic conditions in California, while not having physical contacts with any of her peers and outside of her immediate family members for almost 2 years, she has become even more sensitive and anxious child. Therefore, the thought of going back to school in person with the classmates she barely knew and of not being sure about other people's COVID hygiene practices caused her to have a lot of anxiety. Then being with them in classrooms and feeling forced to eat her lunch at school's cafeteria with an even larger crowd, watching others who did not strictly practice hygiene triggered her to show probably hidden panic attack disorder symptoms in her daily life. Her old routine lifestyles at school and home now have become the source of her trauma, which is expressed in the form of panic attacks and often in a very violent form.
Perkenankan saya untuk berbagi cerita. Maaf, suara saya sudah terdengar ya? dari salah satu kolega saya tentang cucunya yang berumur 9 tahun. Anak ini terkena serangan panik karena setelah mulai kembali lagi ke sekolah. Serangan panik itu dipicu karena dia selama ini terisolasi dan menerima banyak sekali informasi tentang COVID-19, betapa kejamnya COVID-19 itu, dan dia mempelajari bahwa orang-orang sekitarnya mulai meninggal karena COVID. Lalu dia mulai mempertanyakan tentang praktek-praktek higienis yang dilakukan teman-temannya, dan dia kembali ke sekolah di mana banyak sekali kerumunan orang, di mana dia mulai mempertanyakan apakah dia pada akhirnya akan sakit. Ketika serangan panik itu mulai menyerang dia akan mulai bertindak kasar secara fisik, menyumpah serapah, bahkan melukai saudara-saudara yang masih kecil. Profesor.
This heartbreaking story of my friend's granddaughter may be an extreme case, but is one of the many forms of trauma experienced and expressed by millions of people during the global pandemic we are living through. Even at a graduate theological school where I teach, trauma-related behaviors are shown by many of my students. In a recent student survey that my school, ILEF School of Theology in Denver, Colorado of USA conducted, 67% of our students said that their biggest challenge these days is the feeling of stress, which hinders them from concentrating on school. Most students also expressed lack of motivation and feeling of isolation related to their stress. In a weekly meeting that I convene with the people in student services, we notice students' mental health related concerns and crises are significantly increased in the last 2 years, and this pattern we see at my school is also a prevalent phenomenon in the US higher education institutions.
Cerita yang saya bagikan ini mungkin contoh kasus yang ekstrim, tetapi juga ternyata dialami oleh mahasiswa saya. Sekitar 67% mahasiswa mengalami mengalami stres dan membuat mereka tidak bisa berkonsentrasi di sekolah. Karena itu, dan sebagian dari mereka memiliki kesulitan untuk mengekspresikan emosi mereka karena merasa terisolasi. Lalu dalam satu pertemuan pembelajaran, saya mulai memperhatikan bahwa kesehatan mental mahasiswa saya mulai terganggu dan secara signifikan di dalam 2 tahun terakhir ini.
According to Mays Imad, a neuroscientist who studies stress and emotions and their effect on students' learning, the social isolation and loneliness of the COVID-19 pandemic present significant emotional and physical health risks that make people, both instructors, teachers, and students, feel disconnected and therefore put us on high alert, triggering the body's stress response. She explains that human brains ceaselessly work to help us alive and safe by constantly scanning our environments, identifying possible threats and dangers, and responding to them. During a pandemic, our brain is grappling with at least 2 overarching issues. First, because we humans are social beings, our brains view the current social isolation due to the pandemic as a threat. When social isolation is prolonged, humans' physical and mental health are negatively impacted. When such a condition continues, our brain is programmed to be afraid of others, because the person sitting next to me in a classroom or the person standing close to me at a store is a potential source of infection that can jeopardize my life. Second, when isolation and unresolved risky situations like our current pandemic continues, we become scared of the loneliness, of the pain of loss we see around us and may feel, and of the unpredictability of the future. We are trying to make a sense of existential threats brought on by a pandemic. However, since there is no clear and immediate solution, we, including teachers and students, experience stress and anxiety as we living with the prolonged feelings of danger and uncertainty.
Menurut Miss Imad, seorang neuroscientist yang mempelajari stres dan emosi dan efeknya terhadap pembelajaran, social isolation, isolasi sosial dan kesendirian, kesepian yang disebabkan karena pandemik ini ternyata mengganggu kesehatan fisik dan mental banyak orang, terutama bagi para guru, instruktur, dan para mahasiswa, murid yang merasa disconnected, terputus dari dunia luar, dan sehingga memicu satu respons dari sistem tubuh mereka. Beliau menjelaskan bahwa otak manusia akan selalu bekerja untuk membuat kita tetap hidup dan merasa aman dengan cara memindai lingkungan sekitar kita, mengidentifikasikan bahaya dan ancaman dan merespon terhadap itu. Selama pandemik, otak kita disajikan dengan dua hal. Yang pertama, karena kita adalah makhluk sosial, otak kita mulai melihat isolasi sosial ini sebagai suatu ancaman. Ketika ini diperpanjang, secara fisik kita akan bereaksi secara negatif. Dan ketika kondisi tersebut mulai terus diperpanjang, akhirnya otak kita diprogram untuk takut satu sama lain. Takut karena orang yang duduk sebelah kita, takut karena apapun yang ada di sekitar kita, di kelas ataupun dimanapun. Yang kedua adalah ketika isolation ini, masa isolasi dan situasi yang kita anggap berbahaya ini, kita mulai takut akan kesepian. Takut akan kehilangan yang kita lihat, takut akan kehilangan orang-orang sekitar kita, dan ketidakpastian masa depan. Kita mencoba membuat suatu logika bagaimana bahaya ini karena adanya pandemi. Profesor?
This chronic stress and anxiety sometimes often become the source of a trauma. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, which in the United States we call SHAMSHA, an agency within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, such chronic situations of a life filled with anxiety, feeling of a danger and threat is trauma. SHAMSHA defines trauma as an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has a lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. An event can be traumatic in a single happening or over a series of instances. The same events can be experienced as a trauma by one person, but not by others, depending on their life circumstances at that time. However, when an event or a series of instances are experienced by a group of people or a community for a prolonged time, or one time with overwhelming effects, the entire society can experience such an event as a trauma.
Menurut SAMHSA, sebuah agensi di Departemen Kesehatan US, situasi yang penuh dengan kecemasan, yang penuh dengan merasa bahaya dan merasa terancam adalah sebuah trauma. Trauma di sini definisikan sebagai suatu keadaan atau serangkaian keadaan atau situasi yang dialami oleh seseorang yang merasa terancam secara fisik dan secara emosi. Dan itu akan berlangsung cukup lama sehingga dia akan mengganggu fungsi mereka secara sosial, secara emosional, secara fisik, dan secara spiritual. Sebuah kegiatan, sebuah kejadian akan menjadi sebuah event, sebuah acara, sebuah kejadian yang traumatik yang menimbulkan trauma karena ada beberapa insiden. Dan selama suatu kejadian ini dialami oleh satu orang, tapi tidak oleh orang lain, mereka akan merasa ketergantungan oleh situasi orang lain. Karena itu, walaupun demikian, serangkaian kegiatan, serangkaian kejadian atau insiden yang dialami oleh sebuah komunitas dalam waktu yang cukup lama, dengan efek yang membuat mereka kewalahan, semua masyarakat akan mengalami trauma.
For example, war, military combat, natural disaster, pandemic, discriminations against the social minorities due to their race, ethnicity, gender, religion, class, and others can cause harmful physical and psychological effects on the entire group of people. In a more individual level, tragic events like a sexual assault, abandonment, death of a loved one, domestic violence, bullying, poverty, and many other psychologically overwhelming situations about which people feel they cannot control and handle will be critical cause for their trauma. Whether it is experienced by an individual or a group of people, it is important to remember that trauma is not the event itself, but the deep wounds resulting from the event.
Sebagai contoh kejadian tersebut adalah perang militer, natural disaster, lalu ada pandemik, lalu ada diskriminasi karena minoritas sosial, karena rasnya, karena etnisnya, karena gender, karena agama, kelas, dan macam-macam. Semua ini bisa mengakibatkan suatu efek yang berbahaya secara untuk fisik dan psikologis untuk satu orang atau seluruh orang dari grup tersebut. Dalam level yang individual, kejadian-kejadian tragis seperti misalnya kekerasan seksual, ditelantarkan, atau kehilangan orang-orang yang dicintai, atau kekerasan rumah tangga, perundungan, kemiskinan, dan banyak sekali yang mereka rasa tidak bisa dikontrol, tidak bisa ditangani, ini juga akan menimbulkan trauma. Apakah itu dirasakan oleh satu individu atau sekelompok orang, perlu diingat bahwa trauma itu bukanlah kejadiannya, tetapi luka yang mendalam yang ditimbulkan dari kejadian tersebut. Profesor?
In other words, trauma can result from a variety of events depending on how the event is experienced by an individual or a community. Also, trauma can be triggered by many different things, including incidents not seemingly related to its original cause. So here, please allow me to share an example from my own teaching experiences. During my first year as a full-time faculty, I was standing in the middle of my class, feeling completely lost. We were covering the subject of who of religious education, which included identity and power in education. However, during my lecture, several students started screaming and shouting as they noticed one of their classmates, my students, appeared to have a seizure. Several of us created a space for the student not to be hurt until paramedics arrived, and I invited others to look the other way. A few minutes later, she stopped shaking and felt well enough to sit on her chair when the paramedics arrived. But when they arrived, she refused to go to an emergency room and insisting that she was okay. She also declined my invitation to go to her dorm room and rest. Then she burst into tears, almost shouting at me, "Why are you making us talk about identity and power? It is nothing to do with the religious education. This class terrifies me, scares me. I did not expect to be triggered to relive my trauma at a religious education class." Other students and I tried to unsuccessfully calm her down, but she went on and on, almost wailing. Still today, I do not remember how I wrapped up the class. All I remember is feeling utterly lost. Later, I learned through many conversations that she is a survivor of a childhood sexual violence by a family member and sexual assaults by an authority figure in her church. But thanks to many years of therapy and her determination, she was able to put her life together. However, she would sometimes be triggered by certain words and behaviors associated with her traumatic memories. When that happened, she would have anxiety attacks, often in a seizure form, and emotional distress as she did in the class. In mental health, such a behavior that my students showed is called the re-traumatization, which means a reliving of a trauma triggered by certain things related to their memory of the original trauma.
Dengan kata lain, trauma itu adalah suatu hasil dari berbagai kejadian. Tergantung bagaimana kejadian itu dialami oleh satu individu atau satu komunitas. Trauma juga bisa dipicu karena banyak hal, melalui insiden yang mungkin tidak terkait dengan penyebab aslinya. Perkenankan saya berbagi cerita ketika saya mengajar. Di awal-awal saya mengajar sebagai dosen tetap, saya mengajar waktu itu adalah pendidikan religius, pendidikan agama, yang termasuk di dalamnya adalah topik tentang identity dan power. Jadi identitas dan kekuasaan dalam education, dalam pendidikan. Selama kuliah ada beberapa mahasiswa yang mulai berteriak-teriak dan mereka ternyata mereka melihat salah satu teman mereka, salah satu mahasiswa di dalam kelas itu mengalami kejang. Dan beberapa mereka langsung menelepon para medis dan menunggu sampai datang. Ternyata anak itu bisa pulih dan dia bisa duduk kembali di kursinya, tapi menolak untuk kembali ke kamarnya, kamar asramanya. Dan akhirnya dia menangis dan menceritakan mengapa dan menyalahkan saya, mengapa Anda membuat kita bercerita tentang identity dan power. Tidak ada hubungannya dengan pendidikan religious education. Kelas ini menakutkan. Dia menceritakan bahwa dia harus menghidupi kembali trauma yang dialaminya selama dia belajar di pendidikan agama. Setelah itu saya tahu bahwa anak ini mengalami kekerasan seksual dari salah satu anggota keluarganya dan kekerasan seksual dari salah satu anggota gereja yang figur yang cukup otoritatif. Tapi karena bertahun-tahun ada terapi dan tekadnya untuk sembuh, anak ini akhirnya pulih. Namun dia kadang-kadang akan mengalami serangan panik apabila dia mendengar suatu kata ataupun apapun yang memicunya dia untuk mengingat kembali kenangan-kenangan yang menimbulkan trauma tersebut. Dan ketika itu terjadi, serangan itu terjadi biasanya dalam bentuk kejang dan di emotional distress ketika dia sangat-sangat stres seperti yang terjadi di kelas waktu itu. Nah, dalam kesehatan mental, perilaku ini kita sebut dengan nama re-traumatization. Jadi menghidupi kembali trauma yang dipicu karena sesuatu hal yang membuat mereka mengingat kembali trauma mereka yang asli.
When students experience trauma or are triggered to remember traumatic events, like my students, they cannot learn. Neurologically, students cannot learn because they do not feel safe. Their entire attention is given to protecting themselves from threats and danger they sense. Therefore, they cannot focus on what is going on, including schoolwork. According to the 2019 report of the Center for Disease Control of the US CDC, up to 2/3 of US children have experienced at least one type of a serious childhood trauma, such as abuse, neglect, natural disaster, or experiencing or witnessing violence. In the US, trauma is possibly the largest public health issue facing our children today. Traumatized students are especially prone to difficulty in self-regulation, negative thinking, being on high alert, difficulty trusting adults, and inappropriate social interactions. They often haven't learned to express emotions healthily either. Instead, they show their distress through aggression, avoidance, shutting down, or other off-putting behaviors. These actions can feel antagonistic to teachers who do not understand the root cause of the student's behavior, which can lead to misunderstandings, ineffective interventions, and missed learning time. However, when teachers are proactive and responsive to the needs of students suffering from traumatic stress and make small changes in the classroom that foster a feeling of safety, it makes a huge difference in their ability to learn.
Ketika mahasiswa atau seorang siswa mengalami trauma yang dipicu untuk mengingat kembali kejadian-kejadian traumatis seperti mahasiswa saya, mereka tidak bisa belajar. Secara neurologis, secara saraf mereka tidak bisa belajar karena mereka tidak merasa aman. Dan mengapa tidak merasa aman? Karena seluruh perhatiannya terpusatkan untuk melindungi diri sendiri dari ancaman dan bahaya yang mereka rasakan. Karena itu tidak bisa belajar, termasuk tidak bisa mengerjakan PR, tidak bisa fokus ke semua schoolwork. Menurut CDC, laporan CDC tahun 2019, sekitar 2/3 anak-anak di Amerika mengalami paling tidak satu trauma masa kecil yang serius, seperti kekerasan, ditelantarkan, bencana alam, atau mungkin malah melihat kekerasan, menyaksikan kekerasan. Di Amerika, trauma ini menjadi salah satu kesehatan masyarakat, isu kesehatan masyarakat yang cukup serius yang dialami oleh anak-anak. Ini menurut laporan CDC tahun 2019. Siswa-siswa yang mengalami trauma biasanya rentan terhadap self-regulation untuk mengatur diri, lalu pikiran-pikiran negatif, lalu akan selalu was-was, dan punya masalah serius untuk percaya kepada orang dewasa, dan tidak memiliki interaksi sosial yang tepat. Mereka bahkan tidak bisa mengekspresikan emosi mereka secara sehat. Karena itu, mereka menunjukkan perilaku-perilaku agresif, menghilangi orang, menutup diri, dan bahkan perilaku-perilaku aneh yang lain. Nah, seandainya ini tidak dipahami oleh guru, maka akan terjadi misunderstanding, ketidakpahaman, atau intervensi yang tidak efektif, yang kadang-kadang malah membuat mereka tidak bisa belajar. Jadi, namun, jika gurunya proaktif dan responsif terhadap kebutuhan anak-anak yang mengalami trauma ini, perubahan kecil di dalam sebuah kelas akan menumbuhkan perasaan aman. Dan ini akan membuat perubahan yang sangat besar dalam kemampuan mereka untuk belajar.
Then what educational institutions and educators can do to address the traumas of our students? Concretely, we educators can do two main things related to trauma of our students. One, trauma-informed approach, and the other, trauma-informed pedagogy. First, the trauma-informed approach is a community-wide effort involving education, ministry, social work, public health, police, law, and other sectors of public service. While some sectors provide trauma-specific services or interventions, many do not. Schools like mine, an independent theological school, does not have a capacity to have a health and counseling center. Also, it is not the responsibility of a classroom instructor to provide a mental health service, but rather to partner with the mental health and other service providers by becoming part of a trauma-informed community. Becoming a trauma-informed institution is a campus-wide effort involving student services, academic affairs, administration, faculty, staff, and all areas of the student experience.
Lalu apa yang bisa kita lakukan sebagai seorang educator dan apa yang bisa dilakukan oleh sebuah institusi pendidikan? Ada dua hal. Yang pertama adalah trauma-informed approach, dan yang ketiga, yang pertama adalah trauma-informed approach, dan yang kedua adalah trauma-informed pedagogy. Kata inform ini akan saya terjemahkan dengan kata sadar. Jadi pendekatan yang sadar tentang adanya trauma dan pedagogi yang sadar tentang trauma ini. Yang pertama, trauma-informed approach berarti adalah sebuah upaya yang dilakukan oleh komunitas yang melibatkan pendidikan, ministry, kerja sosial, kesehatan masyarakat, kebijakan, hukum, dan semua layanan publik. Beberapa layanan publik mungkin tidak memberikan satu layanan yang benar-benar trauma spesifik atau suatu pendekatan yang berbasis trauma, dan beberapa tidak. Sekolah seperti saya, sekolah teologi, tidak punya kapasitas untuk pusat-pusat konseling dan kesehatan. Lalu, dan bagi kita sebagai sebuah instruktur, sebagai sebuah educator, ini bukan tanggung jawab kita untuk memberikan layanan tentang layanan kesehatan mental. Namun, berpartner atau bermitra dengan mereka-mereka yang memiliki kapasitas tersebut akan menjadi suatu trauma-informed community. Nah, dengan menjadi sebuah institusi yang sadar akan adanya trauma ini, yang melibatkan layanan mahasiswa, layanan akademik, administrasi, fakultas, staf, dan semua kapasitas yang melibatkan mahasiswa. Professor.
In the U.S. context, the Shamsha defines any setting as a trauma-informed if the people there realize how widespread the trauma is, recognize the signs and symptoms, respond by integrating knowledge into practice, and resist doing further harm. This four-fold description provides guidance for classroom instructors to contribute to the community of trauma-informed care and teaching.
Samsa mendefinisikan setting yang kita sebut dengan trauma-informed atau sadar, terinformasi dengan baik tentang trauma itu jika orang-orang di sana, satu, sadar betapa trauma ini bisa menyebar. Lalu kedua, mengenali gejala trauma itu sendiri. Ketiga, merespon dengan mengintegrasikan pengetahuan dan keterampilan dan praktek. Lalu ketiga, yang terakhir adalah tidak melakukan hal-hal yang bisa membahayakan orang-orang yang terkena trauma tersebut. Nah, dengan 4 ini, realize, recognize, respond, dan resist. Jadi sadar, mengenali, merespons, dan tidak bertindak yang bisa membahayakan lebih lanjut, akan memberikan guidelines, akan memberikan panduan untuk para guru di kelas untuk berkontribusi terhadap perawatan trauma informed dalam suatu komunitas.
First, the trauma, the realizing how widespread the trauma is, and it's a trauma is very important. For example, in the U.S., by the time young people reach college, 66 to 85% of youth report lifetime traumatic event exposure, with many reporting multiple exposures. For example, according to the 2018 U.S. Department of Justice Statistical Report on Sexual Crimes, every 73 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. Putting it differently, 1 out of every 6 American women and 1 in 32 American men have been victims of an attempt or completed with a sexual assault in their lifetime. This means that people who live with the trauma from exposure to gender and sexually based violence are prevalent in the US society. This situation is even more serious in higher education. Almost 27% of females and almost 7% of males among US college students experienced a sexual assault in 2019. I don't think we need to translate this because I just created this. So let me go continue.
Yeah.
So referencing these statistics, Stephanie Crumpton, a practical theologian, says, it is not uncommon for people who have experienced sexual assault to be present in any classroom in an institution of higher education. The trouble is that few educators have been exposed to resources beyond their discipline that would prepare them to navigate the emotional intensity that becomes palpable in the classroom as a student voice the trauma of a sexual assault directly, indirectly, personally, and collectively.
Okay. Mengacu pada statistik yang dibacakan tadi, seorang teologi praktis mengatakan bahwa ini suatu hal yang biasa bagi mereka-mereka yang mengalami kekerasan seksual untuk benar-benar hadir atau terlibat aktif dalam institusi pendidikan tinggi. Masalahnya adalah tidak banyak guru yang memiliki pengetahuan atau sumber daya di luar disiplin mereka, di luar bidang ilmu mereka, yang menyiapkan mereka untuk bisa bernavigasi atau bisa ketika mengalami intensitas emosional yang bisa mengakibatkan mahasiswa tersebut lebih rentan atau bisa memfasilitasi mahasiswa tersebut untuk menyuarakan trauma yang dialaminya, kekerasan seksual baik secara langsung, tidak langsung, secara personal atau secara kolektif.
So let me skip to slides and then go to recognizing. So the second R is recognizing the signs and symptoms of trauma. And this is also essential. Trauma overwhelms a person's normal stress response and elicits a survival-based alarm system. When traumatic memories are triggered, often with no conscious awareness by the survivor, the body responds as if the original threat were still present. People fight, disengage, or people feel numb, no response to what is happening. In classroom settings, students behave badly, not paying attention to the teacher, fight with the peers, and so on, which we educators often identify as maladaptive behaviors. The classroom teacher, recognizing the signs of prior trauma in students, can then learn to respond in appropriate and helpful ways rather than scolding and punishing those students with the trauma.
Mengenali gejala trauma itu hal yang penting. Trauma kadang-kadang membuat orang kewalahan, jadi memicu stres. Dan dengan demikian akan memicu sistem alarm dari tubuh masing-masing. Ketika pengalaman traumatis dipicu untuk diingat lagi, bahkan kadang-kadang tidak disadari oleh para penyintas tersebut, tubuh akan merespon seolah-olah ancaman itu masih ada. Ancaman yang dulu ketika mereka rasakan masih ada. Maka itu orang berkelahi, atau kadang-kadang mati rasa, atau kadang-kadang memutuskan interaksi, jadi tidak berespon terhadap apapun yang terjadi. Dalam setting kelas, mahasiswa akan bertingkah dengan cara yang buruk, jadi tidak memperhatikan gurunya, atau mungkin berkelahi dengan rekan-rekan sekelasnya, yang kadang-kadang kita sebagai educators mengidentifikasikan tersebut sebagai perilaku yang tidak bagus, maladaptif dari tidak biasa dalam kelas. Guru kelas yang bisa mengenali gejala tersebut, prior trauma yang mungkin sebelumnya bisa mereka kenali, akan belajar untuk merespons dengan cara yang tepat, dengan cara yang membantu mahasiswa itu, daripada kita menghukum mahasiswa tersebut karena traumanya.
Next, the R is responding. Responding as a trauma-informed organization.
Bagaimana kita merespon sebagai organisasi? Yes,
Professor. The responding as a trauma-informed organization involves modern strategies for immediate intervention. A trauma-informed institution responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. Therefore, a set of classroom pedagogical techniques is but one part of an overall organizational response. In educational context, it is just as important for administrators and staff in all levels to become trauma-informed as it is for instructors. In other words, having a trauma-informed approach as an institution is creating a culture, policies, and practices for everyone to be trauma-informed practitioners.
Merespon sebagai organisasi yang trauma-informed, yang sadar dengan trauma ini, itu melibatkan lebih dari sekedar strategi untuk intervensi langsung. Dalam sebuah institusi yang sadar tentang trauma ini akan merespon dengan cara terlibat penuh, dengan cara mengintegrasikan pengetahuan tentang trauma itu ke dalam kebijakan, prosedur, dan praktek-praktek. Jadi kelas teknik-teknik pengajaran di kelas itu hanyalah salah satunya dari seluruh respon secara organisasi. Dalam pendidikan edukasional, lebih penting jika semua administrator, semua staf dari semua level akan menjadi orang-orang yang trauma informed. Seperti juga halnya juga pada dosennya atau pada gurunya. Dengan kata lain, memiliki pendekatan trauma informed ini sebagai sebuah institusi berarti menciptakan budaya atau kebijakan atau praktek-praktek bagi semua orang untuk menjadi seorang yang trauma informed practitioner.
I think I missed that one thing. Last R is realize. Failing to realize, recognize, and respond appropriately to a survivor of trauma can do harm. Re-traumatization can easily occur when we fail to recognize the signs of trauma our students experience by invoking rules without care, applying policies regardless of our students' circumstances. We need to shift from an attitude of blame, what's wrong with you, to a stance of care, what has happened to you. This shift in perspective to a trauma-informed approach allows the classroom instructor to become a partner in recovery and resilience for survivors of a trauma.
Gagal untuk mengenali atau untuk merespon secara tepat kepada para penyintas trauma ini sebetulnya bisa memberikan suatu hal yang buruk. Re-traumatization bisa terjadi ketika kita gagal mengenali gejala-gejala trauma yang dialami oleh mahasiswa kita. Dengan cara malah kita menerapkan suatu peraturan tanpa kepedulian, menerapkan kebijakan tanpa memperhatikan situasi mahasiswa. Kita harus bergeser dari suatu perilaku yang menyalahkan menjadi perilaku yang peduli. Dengan adanya pergeseran dalam perspektif ini akan membuat kita, para instruktur di kelas, menjadi partner, menjadi mitra dalam upaya pemulihan.
while we create the trauma-informed approach as an entire institution, we also need to have a concrete action plans, which I call here trauma-informed pedagogy. A trauma-informed approach requires not only knowledge of trauma, but also commitment and action. We need to practice trauma-informed teaching in our classroom. Once we understand what trauma is, how widespread the trauma is in our society, in our schools and classrooms, and how to recognize the signs of trauma exhibited by our students. We need to respond to them through trauma-informed pedagogy. Without helping them have holistic views about who they were, including their traumatic experiences, our students cannot make a full sense of their lives in relation to God.
Pendekatan trauma informed ini membutuhkan tidak hanya pengetahuan tentang trauma, tetapi juga komitmen dan action dan tindakan. Kita harus mempraktekkan pengajaran trauma informed ini di dalam kelas. Begitu kita paham apa itu trauma dan bagaimana trauma ini menyebar di dalam masyarakat dan di sekolah, di kelas, dan bagaimana cara kita untuk mengenali gejala trauma yang dialami oleh para mahasiswa. Kita butuh untuk merespons melalui trauma informed pedagogy. Oke, tanpa membantu mereka untuk mendapatkan suatu pandangan perspektif utuh tentang siapa mereka, termasuk pengalaman traumatis mereka tidak bisa menghidupi hidup mereka secara penuh dalam hubungannya dengan Tuhan.
Theologian Stephanie Crumpton and Darrell Stevens respectively emphasize that trauma-informed pedagogy is to recognize that many of our students come to us with their current and past traumatic experiences. Generally, 5 core values adopted from trauma-informed care principles guide the trauma-informed pedagogy. They are promoting safety, building trustworthiness, making choices available, collaboration to build the trauma-sensitive community, and empowerment of the trauma survivor.
Teolog Stephanie Crumpton dengan Darrell Stevens menekankan bahwa trauma-informed pedagogy adalah untuk mengenali banyak dari mahasiswa kita datang kepada kita dengan pengalaman-pengalaman traumatis yang terjadi di masa lalu atau di masa sekarang. Biasanya ada 5 nilai inti yang diadopsi dari prinsip-prinsip trauma-informed care. Guide trauma informed pedagogy. Yang pertama adalah promoting safety, jadi mempromosikan keselamatan, mendahulukan keselamatan, dan building trustworthiness, berarti membangun kepercayaan. Ketiga, making choices available, menunjukkan adanya pilihan. Keempat, collaboration to build trauma sensitive community, berarti berkolaborasi untuk membangun suatu komunitas yang sensitif terhadap trauma ini. Dan yang terakhir adalah empowerment of the trauma survivor, pemberdayaan para penyintas trauma ini. Professor?
So safety, I put some definitions here. So I invite participants to read this rather than me reading it and then translating it.
So would you like me to translate the slides? Sure. Oke. Saya akan memberikan definisi dari kata safety, keselamatan. Oke. Person dealing with the effect of trauma, berarti orang-orang yang berhadapan dengan efek dari trauma ini harus merasa aman untuk bisa menurunkan the psychological survival response. Jadi tingkat keselamatan mereka, tingkat penyintasan mereka secara psikologis yang memungkinkan mereka untuk merengkuh kembali kontrol dalam kehidupan masa sekarang. Dalam kelas, keselamatan ini bisa melibatkan misalnya memberikan marked exit. Misalnya Anda menunjukkan jalan pintu keluar atau menunjukkan nearby restroom, tempat-tempat lokasi kamar kecil yang terdekat secara verbal dan silabus Anda bisa menunjukkan adanya izin dari guru untuk mereka untuk meninggalkan kelas kapanpun dirasa perlu. Julian Hammer, Trauma Informed Religious Pedagogue, menyarankan guru-guru bisa memasukkan sumber daya yang merespon terhadap trauma ini di dalam silabus mereka.
Next one is trustworthiness. Please do so again.
Oke, trustworthiness ya. Oke, trustworthiness berarti membangun kepercayaan ini ya. Beberapa pengalaman yang traumatis ini karena ada salah satu orang yang otoritatif menyalahgunakan kekuasaan mereka terhadap mereka yang lebih rentan. Jadi dengan membangun kembali kepercayaan ini penting bagi para penyintas, survivors penyintas. Jadi untuk mengurangi perasaan terancam dan memberikan suatu ruangan atau lingkungan yang lebih kondusif untuk pemulihan, guru-guru kelas harus jelas, harus transparan tentang kebijakan, prosedur, ekspektasi, harapan, lalu boundaries, professional boundaries, berarti batasan-batasan profesional dan peran mereka.
And next one is a choice.
Choice di sini, pilihan.
Yeah.
Menyediakan informasi yang cukup tentang hak-hak mereka. Yang dimaksud hak mereka, maksudnya mereka yang mengalami trauma ini, hak mereka tanggung jawab dan menawarkan suatu banyak pilihan. Ketika dibutuhkan akan membantu memulihkan rasa kontrol dari penyintas tersebut. Contohnya bisa dengan mengembangkan covenant of presence. Dalam artian ini adalah hal-hal yang dibutuhkan untuk kehadiran di kelas. Untuk masalah ini, jadi tidak hanya mengontrol, mengendalikan kepercayaan, keselamatan, tetapi juga memberikan pilihan dan kendali kepada mereka.
Yeah, this covenant of presence is something that I do. So in the first class, I invite my students to create how they can they behave in the class and support each other. And then when they're upset by another student or by a professor like me, how we can address that rather than either hiding or being angry or fighting or criticizing negatively.
Di kelas saya, Covenant of Presence ini berarti perjanjian akan kehadiran. Jadi apa yang terjadi dalam kelas seandainya Anda mengalami itu? Apakah Anda akan berkelahi? Ataukah Anda akan bicara dengan rekan Anda di kelas? Atau apa? Ini perjanjian yang disepakati bersama antara guru dengan siswanya. Professor?
And the next one is a collaboration. Just a simple.
Hang on.
Yes.
So this, collaboration ini menjadi penting sebagai sebuah komunitas yang trauma-informed karena resilience dari trauma ini akan menjadi meningkat, akan ditingkatkan dengan adanya jaringan dukungan sosial dan untuk ini dan ini akan menguntungkan bagi para penyintas. Jadi mereka akan memiliki keagenan, kemandirian dalam proses tersebut. Communal support and accountability.
Yeah, so trauma, surviving trauma and overcoming is everybody's work.
Jadi untuk membantu mereka pulih dari trauma adalah pekerjaan semua orang.
And so next one is aligned with today's theme, empowerment, healing and empowerment. But this is a principle based on very positive approach that the trauma can overcome. We can overcome the trauma. Therefore, we educators need to help our students discover and develop their own capacities.
Ini empowerment, pemberdayaan. Jadi ini termasuk salah satu upaya kita untuk membantu mahasiswa mengembangkan kapasitas mereka. Professor?
Yeah. So, in addition to these 5 core values, I also want to include the paying attention to moral stress of our teachers. So there is something called the moral stress or moral injury that is a very growing discipline in the US in theological education. It is paying attention to people who have to do things that they do not believe that is different from their moral standard. So during pandemic, many of our teachers experience this moral stress or moral injury because many of their method and practice have changed and they feel like they have not mastered a good method. And they also have to learn new skills while they are teaching students at the same time. They also have a personal stress at home with their children and concerns about their own health and other issues, economic insecurity, and also when they connect with their students, that they notice that many of their students have concerns, but they do not have a means to help them. So when teachers feel they cannot help and they are helpless, they live with a moral stress or moral injury while they try to do their work. Therefore, also any educational institution needs to come up with ways to support the teachers who live with a lot of moral stress.
Ini berbicara tentang moral stress yang dihadapi atau yang dialami oleh para guru. Ada satu istilah moral stress dan moral injury. Jadi stres secara moral atau luka secara moral. Banyak guru ini merasa tidak berdaya atau bahkan dalam posisi tidak bisa berbuat apa-apa ketika mereka harus melakukan sesuatu di luar dari yang biasanya mereka lakukan. Di tengah pandemi ini mereka cara mengajar mereka berubah. Mereka harus belajar hal-hal yang baru, lalu di rumah juga mengalami tekanan-tekanan, mungkin dari segi ekonomi atau yang lain-lain. Dan mereka ketika mereka berada di kelas, mereka juga tahu bahwa anak-anak mereka, mahasiswa mereka juga atau siswa mereka mengalami hal yang sama. Namun mereka dihadapkan dalam satu posisi di mana mereka merasa tidak bisa membantu, tidak punya sumber daya dan merasa tidak berdaya. Kejadian ini membuat mereka hidup dalam suatu tekanan moral, dalam suatu luka moral yang akan mereka bawa. Karena itu institusi juga harus menyediakan satu cara atau untuk membantu para guru ini.
So, in religious education that we are engaging is based on principles that pursue human wholeness in relation to God, the Holy. The cognitive, emotional, and physical, and gendered, sexual, and spiritual dimensions of human nature and experience are inseparable and intricate parts of every education anchored in religion. Then how are these principles reflected in our own practices as we live through these traumatic times?
Okay.
And for that, I have several questions for us to think about.
Pertanyaannya tadi ada pertanyaan yang untuk dipikirkan. What and how we teach about being a holistic and religious person in an age of global pandemics. Apa dan bagaimana kita mengajarkan tentang menjadi individu yang religius tapi juga holistik di tengah era pandemi global ini. Kedua, do we utilize various methods of teaching based on care to help people engage in their entirely of who they are? Apakah kita akan menggunakan banyak metode berdasarkan care, kepedulian untuk membantu orang-orang untuk terlibat, untuk membuat mereka sadar untuk terlibat penuh. Terus yang ketiga, do we only teach through words or various forms of arts, movies, performances, contemplation, prayers, and other embodied learning methods are offered? Apakah kita hanya mengajarkan melalui kata-kata atau melalui bentuk-bentuk seni yang beragam, seni, film, performance, pertunjukan, kontemplasi, doa, atau yang lain juga ditawarkan?
These are some of the things I do in my classes, arts, work, walking, reading, movies, and using a cell phone for anonymous to assess where students are and other things.
Ini ya contoh-contoh yang saya lakukan di kelas saya. Ada work of art, karya seni yang mungkin bisa ditiru. Okay.
And then two more questions that I want us to think about.
Do we encourage students to get to learn about each other, or in teaching only focus on building relationship with us for mastering information provided by us the teacher? Apakah kita mendukung anak untuk belajar tentang satu sama lain, atau kita hanya berfokus untuk membangun relationship, hubungan dengan kita, demi kepentingan menguasai ilmu, menguasai informasi yang kita sediakan? Kedua, do teachers, staff, and administrators consider supporting a trauma-informed learning environment by enhancing previously existing relationship with students and families, especially social minorities in our society? Apakah guru, staff, administrator mempertimbangkan untuk mensupport, mendukung lingkungan belajar yang trauma-informed ini dengan cara meningkatkan hubungan yang sudah ada antar guru, keluarga, dan terutama bagi pada minoritas sosial di masyarakat kita?
So even after the current pandemic is over, trauma it created will be with us for a long time. People will be re-traumatized by it, and new realities will cause different traumatic impacts on us and our students. How are we approaching the post-pandemic era with the trauma people will experience in mind so that we can help them live their calling as the image of God? I do not have an answer, but I invite us to continue to think about it. Thank you, and terima kasih.
Bahkan setelah pandemi nanti ini berlangsung, trauma itu akan tetap ada dengan kita. Jadi orang-orang akan re-traumatized dan kenyataan-kenyataan baru akan menimbulkan dampak-dampak traumatis yang berbeda bagi kita atau bagi para siswa. Dan bagaimana kita akan mendekati era pasca pandemik ini dengan orang-orang yang mengalami trauma dan atau mungkin akan mengalami trauma, sehingga kita bisa hidup bersama mereka, sehingga kita bisa membantu mereka menghidupi panggilan mereka sebagai image Tuhan.
Wonderful.
Tidak ada jawabannya, tapi mari kita pikirkan.
Wonderful, thank you, Professor Lee. It's very insightful. It's very powerful presentation. Thank you, and then very, very good job, Mrs. Fanny. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor, listening to you, it's like in my mind, I like watching a documentary movie, something like that. Things are keep coming, and it's really aching my heart. My heart's really aching because of that, not about the personal experience, but the educational experience I've been encountered with students in this level. And then we learn about the source of trauma caused by pandemic. Personal trauma can grow into a communal trauma, very powerful. And then also the cycle of trauma can be repeated. The concept that have been presented is re-traumatization. And then also for pointing out the moral stress of teachers. A very powerful presentation, very insightful as for me, and then I hope all the participants can feel it also. Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for now. And then we'll be back to you in the question and answer session. Now we are moving forward for our speakers. Second speakers, Dr. Hope Anton, and then she will. She prepared a very wonderful presentation also under the title of Christian Education During COVID-19. I think the presentation will be more practical, and then so that we can see through the link between the first presentation and then second presentation of our speakers today. Ibu Hope, Ma'am Hope, please, the time is yours.
Hello. Good morning. Selamat pagi dari Hong Kong. Congratulations to the Faculty of Theology of UKSW on your 53rd anniversary and for organizing this very important international seminar. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this seminar and especially to follow my trustee from the United Board, Dr. Boyong Lee. I think she said everything that needs to be said, but I will try to add my small contribution. And I would like to begin by introducing a bit of the whole person education mission of the United Board. Sorry, I will share my screen. Okay, so I will, although I was able to share a paper that I had previously shared with the Silliman University of Divinity School, I will try to add to it, especially after listening to yesterday's presentations as well, and then today to Dr. Boyong Lee. So this is whole person education represented by WPE. The mission of the United Board, which is to develop the person intellectually, spiritually, and ethically. I want to begin with this because this is like the foundation of what we do, and it connects to your concerns as well in the theological education. So basically, different institutions have different definitions of whole person education, and I know UKSW is very strong in this. But in terms of intellectual development, what we mean here is learning to learn, so that learners become continuous learners rather than just memorizing facts or information, but continuous learning throughout life is what we really want to develop. And spiritual development is learning to be. And what we mean here is that our learners, as well as our teachers, develop that connectedness with each other, with others in the wider environment, and that includes all created things and creatures created by God. So it's not just that connectedness with people, but also with the natural environment. So that's the spiritual development that we want to promote. And then the ethical development is learning to do, discerning that what is good, what is true, what is right among so much falsehood that we know, so much wrongdoing. So discerning so that people can also act on their choices. So this is what we aim at when we say whole person education is our mission.
Okay. Perkenankan saya mulai dengan menunjukkan whole person education, misi whole person education dari United Board, yaitu untuk mengembangkan manusia seutuhnya secara intelektual, secara spiritual, dan secara etika. Secara intelektual maksudnya belajar untuk belajar, jadi membuat kita menjadi pembelajar sepanjang hayat. Belajar secara spiritual maksudnya kita akan membuat keterkaitan kita, hubungan kita tidak hanya dengan manusia, tapi dengan seluruh makhluk ciptaan Tuhan. Lalu ada secara etis belajar untuk membedakan mana yang baik, mana yang benar, mana yang baik di antara semua yang salah.
And then why we came up with whole person education? I know that UKSW has had it for quite some time. Other institutions may call it differently, like total human development, or holistic education. It can come in different names. But when the United Board decided on it, it was because of the realization that as higher education became more discipline-based, more focused on specialization in the various disciplines, there was a growing separation of things that should be integrated. And so here are these separations. The head from the heart. There's too much focus on learning through the head. But what about the heart? Theory from practice. There's so much, understanding, even memorizing the different theories for each discipline. But how does it really work out in terms of actual practice? Intelligence from spirituality. So there's so much intellectual know-how, but what about the spiritual development? There's so much focus on skills, learning techniques for the different professional disciplines. But what about ethics when doing this, actually, when working this out or implementing this in the real field, in the real world? There's a separation of the university from the community, as the university is so much focused on the academe. What about the actual needs of the community for whom the alumni, the graduates, will be serving or working? There's so much focus on the so-called academic knowledge and to the neglect of local wisdom. There's also so much to learn from local wisdom. Each discipline claiming to be very important or even superior to others. So there's that separation also from other disciplines. There's separation also between research, teaching, and service. And these should actually be the integral functions of the higher education. So with this separation, we came up with whole person education to help address this.
Konsep whole person education ini, pendidikan manusia seutuhnya, ini berangkat dari keprihatinan bahwa pendidikan tinggi mulai memisah-misahkan daripada menyatukan. Contohnya pemisahan itu terjadi pada mereka terlalu berfokus pada kepala daripada pada hati. Mereka terlalu berfokus pada teori daripada praktek, berfokus kepada intelijensia daripada perkembangan spiritual, berfokus kepada keterampilan daripada etika, berfokus kepada universitas daripada komunitas, berfokus kepada pengetahuan akademis daripada local wisdom, kebijaksanaan lokal, berfokus pada setiap disiplin daripada banyak disiplin, berfokus kepada penelitian, pengajaran, dan pengabdian daripada yang lainnya.
So in trying to address these fragmentations or separations of what should have been integrated or integral and holistic, we had actually so many programs planned, and especially under my portfolio is the Whole Person Education Academy, which is supposed to be a residential training of trainers in whole person education. Unfortunately, all those could not be done because of the pandemic. We realized that we cannot just transfer the curriculum of a residential program into an online mode. It's the same thing that teachers realize also, right? You cannot just transfer your lectures by reading to the computer. So it's a total change with this pandemic and with the shift to online modality. But then we also know that the shift to work from home has collapsed the boundaries of people's roles. And this is very true, especially for parents with young children who now need to share the gadgets at home, who now need to be supervised closely for their study from home. So with the collapse in all these boundaries that provided some, differentiation between roles and responsibilities, I think teachers really are having what Dr. Boyong Lee called the moral stress and moral injury. And so how can we just, add to this our programs in online modality? So we had to listen very deeply to the needs of our institutions. Now we're only trying to see how we can move from here as well.
Okay. Saya berbagi cerita ketika saya membuat program, dan ternyata program residensial ternyata tidak jalan karena adanya pandemi. Ternyata masalah saya ini dialami juga oleh banyak guru ketika mereka harus berpindah dari offline menuju online. Dengan demikian mereka akan mentransfer. Nah, yang jadi masalah adalah ketika Anda mentransfer pengetahuan tidak sama, tidak hanya dengan membacakan di depan komputer, butuh lebih dari itu. Bagaimana jika anak-anak kecil yang biasanya belajar di sekolah, sekarang harus belajar di rumah dan berbagi gawai dengan satu sama lain, dengan mungkin saudara-saudara yang lain, dan bagaimana dengan guru yang juga sekarang mengalami moral stress seperti yang tadi dialami oleh yang dijelaskan oleh pembicara pertama. Nah, lalu bagaimana apa yang bisa kita tambahkan dalam pembelajaran online ini?
So I shared with you a paper on Christian education during COVID-19. So I will just briefly sum up the ideas in that paper. So basically, as churches changed to online worship, Christian educators were also asking, so how do we do Christian education now? And so in the Divinity School of Silliman University, I was asked to share my reflection. And I thought about it. Is it really necessary to to conduct Christian education online. It's now conducted online. So this was during the time of lockdowns in the Philippines, which was quite long. And so it's just like the churches, they didn't know what to do. How do you continue to provide Christian education? And so I thought of 4 shifts that we need to do as members of the church, as families especially. And so the first shift is that there should be a shift in the locus of Christian education. We have to accept that, because now we cannot go to the church. We cannot just leave Christian education to the church anymore. Actually, it's going back to how it was, because the original education really began with the family, right? Everything started with the family, the basic unit of society. So going back to that is having the locus of the home for the locus of Christian education. And then the content of Christian education should also be shifted from what we tend to do was to keep it very biblical based. But now it should be life based. It's really the ordinary activities of families in the home, whether it's doing household chores, gardening, and keeping the home safe from abuse. And when there are fights, how do we negotiate and resolve conflicts? So these are the ordinary activities that happen in the home, which can become the content of Christian education. The pedagogy also should change. We used to be so focused on age groups, right? And so we have different curriculum for kindergarten and the young ones, and then certain primary groups, whether younger, older primary, and then high school, and so on. But in the home, there's no such thing. It's intergenerational. And so the pedagogy also has to change. Very mindful of the different needs and interests of people in their different levels of understanding as well as background. And then there's also a needed shift in the person and role of the teacher, because we cannot rely on Sunday school teachers. We just would send our children to Sunday school and let the Sunday school teachers deal with them. But now it's the home, and whether it's the parents who are already busy trying to work from home and attend to sick members and the elderly who also have their needs, or whether it's children also trying to, we nowadays, I think younger people, even children, are so fast to learn tricks with our gadgets and devices. And some of them are the ones teaching us how to apply, how to install, and make use of different apps. So we recognize then that the teacher is no longer in the traditional teacher that we tend to conceive of. So the teacher, the roles of teachers, teaching and learning, seem to be quite fluid, between young and old, between parents and children. So these needed shifts are very important for Christian education to happen in the home when we cannot meet in the church.
Perkenankan saya mulai memperkenalkan bagaimana pendidikan Kristiani, pendidikan agama ini selama era pandemik. Kalau kita berbicara gereja mulai beralih online, lalu apakah berarti program-program pendidikan Kristiani, pendidikan agama juga akan dihentikan atau tetap dijalankan? Saya memfokuskan kepada 4 pergeseran atau 4 perubahan yang diperlukan. Pergeseran pertama terjadi pada tempat yang darinya kita serahkan itu semuanya ke gereja. Sekarang kita akan kembali ke keluarga. Ini pendidikan awal tentang agama berasal dari keluarga. Sebetulnya kita hanya kembali. Yang kedua adalah pergeseran konten isi yang biasanya berbasis kitab suci akan menjadi berbasis kehidupan nyata. Jadi ini akan diterapkan melalui aktivitas-aktivitas sederhana di dalam rumah. seperti aktivitas rumah tangga, berkebun, ataupun menjaga agar keluarga bebas dari kekerasan. Lalu yang ketiga adalah pergeseran di pedagogi. Biasanya dulu sebelum pandemi, pedagogi ini kurikulumnya berbeda di setiap kelompok usia. Kurikulum TK tidak sama dengan kurikulum pendidikan tinggi. Ketika Anda bergeser ke rumah, tidak mungkin melakukan pemisahan tersebut. Sehingga akan ada yang namanya antar generasi. Antar generasi dengan berbagai usia, berarti akan ada kebutuhan, akan ada minat yang berbeda bagi setiap orang. Yang keempat adalah pergeseran peran atau pergeseran orang dari guru. Yang dulunya kita guru secara tradisional di kelas, dan ketika di rumah kita tidak bisa lagi mengandalkan pendidikan ini kepada guru-guru sekolah minggu, karena semuanya sudah terjadi di rumah. Jadi ini saatnya orang tua ataupun orang-orang tua yang bertanggung jawab di rumah akan mengambil alih peran tersebut. Terima kasih.
So now I will go to another area which is closely related to the theme here. So how do we do religious education for healing and empowerment in this digital age? But mindful of what has already been shared before, I want to share a framework that I heard from a webinar, and the speaker, Dr. Tatang Iskarna, who is a literature professor at Sanata Dharma University in Yogyakarta. He used this framework when presenting a way for dealing with the pandemic. And I thought it was very important, very helpful to me as well as I continue to reflect on it, because what he meant is that it's like the pandemic has disabled all of us. And so we can actually identify with people with disability. And so to use a framework that has been used in critical disability studies would be quite significant. So what this framework includes are 3 steps, actually. So the first one is responsive attitude. And it means facing crisis head on. So it's not trivializing crisis, it's not denying it or blaming others for it, but facing it head on, because it's here, it's real. So we cannot just try to deny or trivialize it or even blame it on others. Trivializing, blaming it on others is actually like unwillingness to face it. The second step is quick adaptation, which is adjusting to the change, because things have changed and the change will remain, rather than waiting for a return to the old normal. So many people tend to think like that. But for people who have disability, I think they have learned by doing responsive attitude and having responsive attitude and making quick adaptation. So the change is here. It is here to stay, and we therefore need to adjust to it. And the third one is creative innovation. Come up with creative solutions. So don't just wallow in sadness or whatever you are missing of the past, but come up with creative solutions. And I think many of our institutions did this. Okay, maybe I'll let Fanny interpret first.
Saya akan lanjutkan dengan religious education untuk pemulihan dan pemberdayaan di era digital. Saya menyajikan framework, suatu kerangka yang saya ambil dari sebuah webinar dipresentasikan oleh Profesor Tatang Iskarna dari Sanata Dharma. Frameworknya ini meliputi 3 hal. Yang pertama adalah responsive attitude. Jadi kita menghadapi krisis, bukan bermaksud meremehkan atau menyalahkan, tapi mari menghadapi krisis tersebut. Kedua adalah quick adaptation. Jadi perubahan. Jadi bagaimana kita beradaptasi terhadap disabilities tersebut. Jadi kita daripada menunggu untuk kembali ke normal, situasi normal, mari kita beradaptasi terhadap situasi tersebut. Yang ketiga adalah creative innovation. Daripada kita berkutat dalam kesedihan karena adanya pandemi atau karena di era digital ini, mari kita memunculkan satu ide-ide atau satu solusi yang kreatif.
So I think many of our institutions did adapt quickly to the shift to online teaching, for example. Many also tried to come up with creative innovation. But what I wanted to stress is that in the creative innovation, there may be a difficulty because of the lack of resources. So there are some institutions who don't have enough access to resources, especially since having the LMS, the learning management system, can be costly, and training teachers not only involve the act of training, but also upgrading the devices, the technological devices in the campus, or even for our teachers in their own home use. And our students as well, they need to have the devices and access to internet, which many of our students from the remote areas may not even have any access to. So how do we do this? I think I commend the faculty members whose stories I heard through different webinars of how they came up with creative solutions so that no one is left behind. Those students who are from remote areas are still able to learn and study through other ways if they cannot use, if they don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet and they don't have the devices. So these are some of the things that need to be done. How, in order for healing and empowerment to happen, we have to think of those who are going to be left behind, those who don't have access to whatever is needed in order to remain to continue in their studies during this digital age.
Banyak institusi pendidikan sebetulnya sudah mulai beradaptasi dan sudah mulai mencari solusi-solusi kreatif. Tapi mencari solusi kreatif ini mungkin cukup sulit ketika Anda berbicara dalam konteks pendidikan tinggi, terutama. Mungkin bisa banyak hal dalam kesulitan tersebut, misalnya kurangnya sumber daya atau tidak cukupnya sumber daya. Mungkin karena LMS seperti yang Eflon kita pakai sekarang ini mungkin cukup mahal, dan mungkin tidak hanya melatih gurunya, tapi melatih juga bagaimana kita akan menilai guru untuk menggunakan aplikasi-aplikasi tersebut. Dari sisi murid mungkin juga ada keterbatasan dari akses internet, atau mungkin ada tidak adanya gawai yang memadai untuk mengakses tersebut, terutama bagi mereka-mereka yang tinggal di area-area yang remote, yang terpencil. Lalu apa yang bisa kita lakukan? Di sini yang harus kita ingat adalah creative innovation, berarti kita harus memastikan bahwa tidak ada satupun yang akan tertinggal dari peralihan di dalam era digital ini. Ini yang kita maksudkan dengan pemulihan dan pemberdayaan.
In addition, I would also like to say that I commend institutions that have done very well in terms of an institutional approach to this change that we are facing. So during webinars, I also heard of institutions that came up with certain guidelines, for example, in order to ensure kindness and compassion to remain in higher education. So stressing that people and not technology should remain at the heart of higher education, such institutions set up guidelines like these. Look after each other with care, empathy, and kindness. Keep in regular contact with your students and colleagues. Build confidence in technology use, but don't be driven by it.
Saya akan menunjukkan kepada universitas-universitas institusi yang sudah berhasil menyelenggarakan religious education dalam upaya pemulihan dan pemberdayaan di era digital ini, dengan mereka membuat suatu guidelines, panduan. Mari kita berfokus kepada manusianya, orang-orangnya, bukan pada hal yang lain. Jadi panduan itu adalah salah satunya adalah saling merawat, memberikan kepedulian, memberikan empati, memberikan tetap menjaga kontak antar mahasiswa dengan sesama kolega untuk memastikan tidak ada yang tertinggal di belakangnya.
So this is my last slide, I think, and I want to sort of wind up the idea, going back to what it means for whole person education to happen in our institutions. And as I said before, instead of the different disciplines, the different faculties, trying to work on their own thing and building silos of our fields and disciplines, rather than working together, I think we need to learn how to synergize. And I had another paper on this. I just took this title too from that paper. So the need to synergize higher education and theological education. And for institutions like UKSW, where the Faculty of Theology is actually part of a bigger comprehensive university, I think this is a very good thing that you can take advantage of. That theological education and the other disciplines can really enrich each other, rather than each one trying to learn on your own and do something on your own. Why not be enriched by the expertise of the other faculties as well? For example, the interest in trauma, disability, abuse, as mentioned, as yesterday and today, these interests can be enriched by the other fields like psychology, the sciences, law, special education, right? The special needs. What does it mean to do special needs education? So there are these other sources of expertise right there in the university, in the bigger field. And so we just need to work with them. And Dr. Boyong Lee also mentioned that there are so many partners that we can work with, especially in addressing trauma. We may not have the expertise to really address trauma ourselves, but we have those other sectors that are the counselors, the psychologists, or psychiatrists, and groups like that. And so finally, I will conclude with this. Life is whole. Life is multidisciplinary. So why not let the fields and disciplines work together? So I think we can heal each other. We can empower each other when we really learn to work together. So yes, Fanny, can you please?
Thank you. Mari intinya marilah kita bersinergi satu sama lain, daripada semuanya sibuk sendiri membangun persenjataan sendiri, setiap fakultas memikirkan sendiri-sendiri. Mari kita bersinergi. Contohnya Fakultas Teologi UKSW ini sebagai salah satu bagian dari universitas yang komprehensif yang besar. Mari kita bersinergi karena kita sendiri tidak mungkin punya semua ekspertis itu. Mungkin Fakultas Teologi bisa memiliki minat dalam pemulihan trauma, atau mungkin dalam disability atau dalam kekerasan, mungkin bisa bersinergi dengan fakultas lain supaya diperkaya dari segi psikologi, sains, law, hukum, dan pendidikan khusus. Lalu saya mau mengutip yang dikatakan oleh Dr. Boyong Lee tadi, kita punya banyak partner. Jadi kita tidak mungkin punya ekspertis, punya kepakaran untuk memulihkan trauma. Tetapi kita punya banyak partner yang bisa kita gandeng untuk bersatu dalam program-program tersebut. Saya akan tutup dengan bullets yang terakhir. Life is whole, life is multidisciplinary. Kehidupan itu sesuatu yang utuh, kehidupan itu multidisiplin. Jadi mengapa tidak membiarkan kita bersinergi, bekerja sama lintas ini? Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Dr. Hope, for the wonderful presentation. The values and the spirit in your presentation is very, very powerful also. And then thank you for the acknowledgement addressed to UKSW and several aspects that you have been mentioned. And then especially for the whole person education in praxis in our teaching and learning process in UKSW. Thank you very much, ma'am. And then in Dr. Hope presentation, we saw at the slide, and then we need to think carefully, and then we need to have a commitment in it. We need to think through, because this is a very important things that have been mentioned and presented in front of all of us. There are 4 needs shifts: church to home, Bible-based to life-based, and then age-based curriculum to dynamical based curriculum, and also the role of the teachers is not, again, one more time, not in the Sunday school teacher anymore or the Christian education teacher anymore at the school, but the adults, the parents in the house. So there are necessary things that have been mentioned to us this morning. And then we see in the chat box, there are some questions already. And then Dr. Hope and then Prof. Lee, maybe you can see through the chat box. Also, I will also reread the questions for you too. I hope Dr. Hope and Prof. Lee can synchronize or synergize also your answer from your point of view. And then if we have more time, then also I have 2 questions, but let's give the first opportunity to the participant who already wrote down their questions into the chat box. And also, dear participant, if you want to ask question, we encourage you to speak in English. Don't worry, we have our wonderful speakers here understand. This is not our first language, so it's okay. They can get your point. So just say, speak in English. I always teach my student every answer in my class. It's okay. No wrong answer in my class. So just be brave to say something. Okay, let us start, yeah. And then if participants, you want to raise some question, please raise your hand using the what is this reaction, and then I will let you talk to the speaker directly, and the host will unmute your microphone, and then we encourage you to speak in English. If you want to speak directly, ask directly, yeah. So we go to the chat box here. I can see here, first question was raised by Mrs. Diah. Mrs. Diah, are there any effective recommendation to socialize all knowledge of trauma policies, procedures, and practices to our fellow neighbors in which we have mixed educational backgrounds and beliefs, since some of them trust to consult to shaman better than to religious leaders or counselors? Wow, this is a very wonderful question. Thank you, Ms. Dia. And I go through this second question in the chat box. How to respond to those people who consider trauma as only ordinary things? Oh, I think 2 of our professors here, they can start with this question. How we respond to people who consider trauma as only ordinary things? What is the big deal of it? Yeah, they might even think that people with trauma only react excessively in this case. The teacher which legalized violence in education, and this is inherited in time, generation to generation. Can trauma really disappear? Can a person with trauma can recover or truly heal? For those with authority, such a teacher or parents, violence is one of the good things to educate children. Okay, and then let's go to the third question. I have a church member who was, the second question was from Miss Trisna, and then this one is from Miss Melva. I have a church member who have been traumatized by his father's sexual violence. Every time she saw an adult male, she was frightened. How can the church heal its trauma? Does the church have a role to play in that? Because many churches don't touch traumatized people as a form of their ministry, as a part of their ministry. Thanks for the great discussion. And then let me go through. Okay, there is Miss Fanny is translating to Indonesia. Okay, for now there are 3 questions that I have been reread it for 2 of you, ma'am. So feel free to start. But I encourage you, if it's possible, with the question how we address the people who just think that trauma is only ordinary things, and then 2 of you can grow into a conversation, even though you are answering the question. Please contribute from your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, let's tackle that question together as a community.
Yes.
Having grown up in Korea, being beaten by teachers at school was very normal thing. We thought that was just a natural thing that everybody has to go through. But as time has changed, and even in Korea now, disciplining your children with the physical means, it's can be reported, and you can be arrested even as a parent, even though you claim that that was a discipline of love, right? So we go through different phase of understanding what love means in terms of disciplining our students and our children. And I think it is also very much related to the notion of education. So as a dean, I don't teach much, but when I teach intro to religious education or Christian education, one of the first things that I ask my student is, what's the difference between schooling and education? What does education mean? So in English word, education comes from 2 roots, Latin and Greek. Educare, which means to draw something out. Out, draw, ducare, draw, right? So you draw something out of a person. And then another root is educere, which is to lead out. The education, the word assumes that everybody has something, that God given something in themselves. So to draw out, you have to acknowledge there is something in that person. And to lead this person out, there is something that this person has, but through education and relationship and information and knowledge and a spiritual formation, the responsibility of a teacher is to help this person recognize that the God-given gifts that this person already has, and then provide that environment through love and education contents and processes, and so which I call education has three dimensions: information, formation, and transformation. But often when we think about education in the 21st century or 20th century education that I went through, education means information. Therefore, to get the information, teachers can use a lot of different means, including physical abuse, to make the student have the knowledge in their head. But the result is that the formation is completely lost. But as a person created in God's image in the Christian religious education context, we not only learn about Lord's Prayer, that's information, but we are called to live the Lord's Prayer in our life, which is a formation through the intervention of the Holy Spirit that leads into transformation. But somehow, even though in personal relationship with God, we experience that, even though we don't use education to describe our relationship with God. But as soon as religious education or formation becomes a formal thing in church or school, it becomes a very much information centered. So I think we need to rethink how we approach our religious education, or even general education at public schools. That do we consider not only information but also formation? That the role of education is to help this person to be who this person is supposed to be, as a holistic person and with a transformation. So I would invite us to think about the concept of education we utilize, which is different from schooling. Schooling is very much like information centered, but schooling is one form of education. So we need to recover the meaning of education. So that's, I think, where we need to start as a beginning point.
Miss Fanny, please.
Oke. Pertanyaannya tadi sudah saya ketikkan. Jawabannya dari Dr. Lee adalah kita perlu memikirkan kembali perbedaan istilah antara schooling, sekolah, dengan pendidikan, education. Dalam hal ini kalau kita bicara tentang sekolah, berarti fokus kita adalah informasi. Jadi Anda akan menggunakan segala upaya untuk membuat anak paham informasi itu. Termasuk jika Anda harus melakukan kekerasan, ya itu akan dilakukan untuk memisahkan kepala dari hati. Tapi ketika kita berbicara tentang pendidikan, kita lebih dari itu. Kita perlu memikirkan bagaimana kita akan menyajikan pendidikan religius itu di sekolah. Apakah akan sebagai sesuatu information center, di berbasis informasi, ataukah lebih dari sekedar itu, di mana kita menekankan pada holistic approach, di mana kita menekankan pada pendidikan manusia yang seutuhnya. Dr. Ho, any?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Ho, please share your insight with us according to that question.
Oh, I thought that was really for Dr. Boyong Lee. But anyway, I was thinking, I recalled we had a program for campus ministers, and it was mentioned by a number of the campus ministers and chaplains who attended that program that churches must accept the fact that we may not be trained to really deal with trauma, and therefore that's probably the reason why the church cannot deal with it head on. Perhaps we don't have members who are specialized in this field, but therefore if we recognize that lack, then we must be able to make referrals, right? We refer the case, the member of the church with such a problem to someone with the expertise. So that came up in the Asian Campus Ministry Forum 3 years ago. The churches must accept that fact and therefore refer the case to those who have the expertise and the training. I saw a question that was also raised to me. May I just answer it directly?
Yeah.
Yes, please, ma'am.
Okay. So it's a question from Yoel Yusafa Tamuangan. First of all, I want to thank you for coming up with your question here. It was translated by Dr. Ika. So being a victim of bullying has become a traumatic experience for him, and therefore he finds it difficult to even respond to questions in class, because he always thinks that if he asks a question, other people's responses will be different from his. And then he asks, is there a curriculum that educators can provide for students who have experienced trauma like me? I think, as Dr. Boyong Lee said, I think we are still trying to embed this trauma-informed approach and pedagogy in education. There may be, I think what I can assure you is that it is important for you to feel that you are loved, you are created in the image of God. That's our basic affirmation, and no matter what disabilities we have. We have different abilities, in fact, not so much disabilities, but we have different abilities also. We are created in the image of God, and we are unique. And actually, when there are questions, it's not expected that our answers will be the same because we are each of us is unique, and so we will come up with different answers. So there's no need to feel afraid that your answer will be different from the others. In fact, that makes for the richness and the variety of the class, that we have different opinions, we have different perspectives, and we should respect that difference. And because that makes who we are. We are created as diverse as we are by God, and that's how the world should be. And we should celebrate this diversity rather than always aim for uniformity. So don't worry, Yoel. Your answers, your insights will always be welcomed, and will be considered very useful for the enrichment of the whole class.
Oke, saya akan menjawab pertanyaan dari Yoel Yosafat Hamonangan. Bisa dilihat situ terjemahannya, ke pertanyaannya dalam bahasa Indonesia. Ini yang sedang kita kembangkan, yang pendidikan berbasis trauma ini, pendidikan religius berbasis trauma, tetapi Anda juga harus sadar bahwa Anda harus merasa bahwa Anda itu dicintai, dan Anda itu diciptakan menurut citra Tuhan. Jadi dan Anda juga harus sadar bahwa setiap orang berbeda, jadi jangan mengharapkan setiap orang akan memiliki jawaban yang sama dari satu pertanyaan yang sama. Jadi kalau justru itu karena ada jawaban yang berbeda, itulah kekayaannya dari sebuah setting kelas. Jadi daripada Anda menomorsatukan keseragaman, mari kita celebrate diversity. Mari kita melihat keberagaman ini sebagai sesuatu yang indah. Terima kasih.
Thank you.
If I may add, in current discussions in what we call in the U.S. Theological Academy disability theologies, the thing that we problematize is that seeing disability as a difference is a problem. Mm-hmm. That itself is a problem. So disability is nothing as a different or a problem to solve, but it is the condition that someone has. I have to wear my reading glasses to be able to read, and to also help my eye muscles coordinate, because too much computer time, I lost a lot of my muscle coordination. So my glass does that. So this is something, the condition I live with, but this is not like a disability that is that makes me as a different or lesser, or it's just a condition. So in disability theologies that we problematize, seeing disability as a problem to solve or difference itself is a problem. And then once we see disability as just one of the forms of a human living way, is then where is God works through this special lens that this person can bring to enrich the God's kingdom on earth. So that's the approach that I encourage us to consider.
Perkenankan saya tambahkan, melihat suatu disabilitas, keterbatasan sebagai sebuah masalah, itu juga masalah sendiri. Sebetulnya yang namanya disabilitas itu bukan suatu masalah, tapi sebuah kondisi. Seperti contohnya saya mengenakan kacamata, yaitu kondisi yang harus saya hidupi. Saya tidak merasa itu sebagai suatu problem. Jika Anda membuatnya itu sebagai suatu masalah yang harus dipecahkan, keterbatasan adalah suatu masalah, itu sudah menjadi masalah sendiri pandangan Anda itu. Jadi tidak mungkin Anda katakan semuanya harus sama. Di sini justru karena ada perbedaan itu cara Tuhan bekerja. Bagaimana Tuhan mewujudkan kerajaannya dalam perbedaan setiap orang.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the questions from Yosafat and Trisna. already being answered, yeah, by the two professors. So let us go back to the first question by Mrs. Dia. Are there any effective recommendations to socialize all knowledge of trauma, policies, procedure, and practice to our fellow neighbors in which we have mixed educational background and beliefs? Since some of the trust to consult to shaman leaders or to counselor. Please, Prof. This is the reality we've been faced in Indonesia.
I think, as I said in my lecture, helping someone or community overcome trauma is not just a one-time thing, but it is building a trauma-sensitive community. It's for everybody's work. And so that's why I mentioned the law and social work and healthcare, counseling, even police, because the police get certain types of trauma, violence reports. So to see the whole picture of what trauma does to people or to community, we have a very limited knowledge if we stay within our own way. So we can, collect the data and come up with a strategy as a community, but depending on one's religious affiliations, spiritual care that we can provide for traumatized person can be unique and different and specialized.
Oke, untuk rekomendasi efektif kepada mereka-mereka dengan trauma tapi dengan latar belakang yang berbeda. Perlu saya tekankan bahwa sebetulnya membantu mereka penyintas trauma itu tidak hanya tindakan yang satu kali terjadi, tapi berulang-ulang, dan kita akan membangun sebuah trauma sensitive community, komunitas yang sadar dan sensitif terhadap mereka-mereka yang pernah mengalami trauma. Anda melibatkan banyak orang di sini. Jadi ketika Anda berbicara bagaimana dengan pengalaman spiritual masing-masing yang berbeda, Anda tidak perlu melakukan semuanya sendiri. Jadi jangan mengandalkan diri sendiri. Anda bisa bermitra. Tergantung kepercayaan mereka masing-masing. Jika harus bermitra dengan orang lain, lakukan. Tidak mungkin semuanya dilakukan sendiri.
Thank you. If there any addition insight from Dr. Hope, please.
I think I want to address another question that I just saw. I think Dr.
Yes.
Bonyong Lee did a good job already.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question was about whole person education. Let me look for it. I have a question. What are the challenges in doing whole person education? How to deal with those challenges? From Fitriani Simbolon. Thank you for this question. I think my quick answer would be that there are challenges because it needs to be able to do whole person education. There has to be a shift in our mindset as teachers, because especially as Asian teachers, we're so used to being teacher-centered in our pedagogy, in our approach to teaching. We're so used to being respected as, the one who knows everything, and therefore the one who can transfer, pass on this knowledge to the students. But whole person education means we have to make a shift from that to being student-centered. So, and we should have this shift also from thinking that learning is very passive, and that's why, we just pass something and then the students are just waiting, because it now must be active learning. The students must be active. Now, the mindsets of students also need to change, because sometimes some of our students who have been used through their basic education to teacher-centered teaching, they have learned to be passive learners, and therefore the spoon feeding seems to be the way. So how to move from that is also a challenge. But we do have many students who are already ready, very active, and who would want to participate in the learning process. So we need to encourage more of this. We need to encourage critical thinking. In the past, I know in my time as a student, teachers didn't want to be questioned. But in fact, we want students to question teacher and teacher's authority our teacher's point of view. So we need to have this change of mindset, and therefore we can change the pedagogy. Without that, it's very difficult to change. That's the most important challenge. The other challenge that some people have raised, especially during this digital age, is that how do we even embed whole person education in an online environment? So this became a big discussion among those who attended our training programs in whole person education, because they said it was already difficult in the face-to-face classes. How much more now in the online classes? But there are ways, and we have the adaptive design for learning program at the Ateneo that can help us, learn the different ways to embed whole person education, even in online learning environments. So we keep this open for educators from members of our network. So there are challenges, but there are ways to resolve them.
Oke, menjawab pertanyaan apakah tantangan dalam mempraktekkan whole person education. Ada dua tantangan. Yang pertama adalah untuk merubah atau mengubah mindset. Ada dua mindset yang harus diubah dari sudut pandang guru dan sudut pandang siswa. Yang pertama adalah dari sudut pandang guru ini sulit karena dalam konteks Asia kita terbiasa guru sebagai sosok atau figur yang otoritatif. Dan kita semua yang tahu segalanya, jadi hanya satu yang bisa transfer knowledge, yang bisa mentransfer ilmu pengetahuan. Dengan demikian, kita sudah terbiasa dengan teacher centered, berbasis guru. Dalam whole person, kita akan menggeser itu menjadi berbasis siswa, student centered. Ini yang sulit. Selama ini, lalu mengapa harus dari murid juga diubah? Karena murid sudah terbiasa dalam situasi teacher centered, mereka menjadi pasif. Karena mereka menerima dan mereka menunggu dari informasi. Sekarang yang diharapkan dari whole person adalah keaktifan. Jadi active learning. Itu yang pertama. Jadi kita akan berpindah dari yang biasanya menunggu, kita akan meminta anak-anak untuk bertanya, untuk berpikir kritis. Di zaman dulu guru tidak suka ditanya, tapi sekarang guru lebih suka kalau muridnya bertanya. Itu yang pertama. Tantangan yang kedua adalah bagaimana sih menggeser atau menyisipkan whole person ini dalam situasi daring, online. Face to face saja pembelajaran offline sudah sangat sulit, apalagi ketika kita harus berbicara dalam konteks pembelajaran daring. Memang ada tantangan, dan saat ini di Ateneo sudah dikembangkan namanya adaptive learning design. Kita belajar bagaimana caranya, berbagai macam cara untuk menyisipkan pendidikan whole person ini dalam situasi pembelajaran apapun. Ada tantangan, akan ada penyelesaian. Terima kasih.
Baik, thank you, Ms. Fanny and Prof. Hope. Okay, let us continue to address another questions here. According to sexual harassment, and then it caused trauma because of that experience. The participant here asked if the church has a role to deal with congregation members who experience such a bad experience like that. So of course the church have a role in it, but they need a very practical answer, and then in a way that a professor can provide for them according to the ministry experience, and also maybe your research experience you can share about it. And then also I will align it with another little bit similar to that question, and then he asked about how we deal with these issues, the sexual harassment that happen in the school or in the congregation by the authoritative people in charge, and then how we deal domestic violence in terms of social ethics. So please feel free. Maybe we can start from Professor Lee. Sorry. You're still unmute, ma'am. I muted, sorry.
Sorry, I was drinking water, so I muted myself. Yeah, church has a very important role to play, but also church has a limited in terms of our training and our care that we can provide. But the things that the church can do is, why there are so many sexual scandals in Christian churches throughout the world, Roman Catholic churches. And right now, I am working on a project that sexual abuse, sexual violence, and religion. And I'm looking at an Asian mega church in Chicago that over 1,000 people reported different kinds of sexual abuse they experienced from their senior pastor. Over 1,000 people. They even created an Instagram page where people just post it constantly throughout the day. So I'm analyzing those Instagram to see what's going on there. So number one, because we need to think about authority. Often someone like me, who is a pastor, who is a theologian, a lot of authority is given to us, that especially we Asian Christians have this worship of a pastor, worship of a theologian and professors, right? So, but when the authority is misunderstood by both people who give authority to someone and then people in authority to misunderstand their authority, a lot of power abuse, including sexual abuse, can happen. So in Christian church context, I think we need to understand, because the people want to stand to the teachings of the Bible, but often we misunderstand the Bible has a very hierarchical authority. But let's think about it. If there are in general two different kinds of authority. One is a very forceful, coercive authority, that if you don't listen to me, you will be punished, right? The other one is authority is established because of relationships, right? So let's think about our relationship with God. If we don't pray today, if we don't listen to God today, are we going to be punished? God is just looking at us that since you didn't listen to me, I will kill you today. That's not the God that we worship. In the New Testament, when Jesus talks about sin, as you probably heard a lot, that is a Greek word for missing. When you use archery, missing the mark, right? So you try to shoot the target with as an archer, but you miss the mark. So that's the term that you just used. So is our God standing next to us? Okay, I will watch whether you miss and then you're out. Or is our God, hey, you missed the mark, try again. And that's the reason why Jesus came to us from being God's son to love us, to forgive us, to restore the relationship. But somehow, even though we believe in Jesus who gave us new life, but we think God will punish us if we don't do that. But so often the Bible and our relationship with God is very much a relational authority that is based on love and care. But often sometimes, but when we exercise authority in church relationship, we tend to think God has authority over punishment or coerced authority. So we need to think about from Bible and through our relationship with God, that what kind of authority we exercise here that is very much abused in the name of God and the Bible to punish or to abuse someone in a weaker position at church. So the church members need to stand up, but instead with the religious educators need to do better education in terms of authority. And then other times, sexual abuse is justified by Bible stories, like so King David actually raped Bathsheba, but we don't say that. Oh, King David made a mistake and he must have had his ego before God, and we keep coming up with excuses for King David, rather than, hey, he raped someone and the child didn't survive, and as a result, the family had a lot of dysfunctions. Therefore, we need to learn from this Bible. So I think sometimes justice we can do is to name what happened rather than keep coming up with an excuse for someone's sexual abuse or power abuse. And I know this is a very risky approach to Bible in many Asian churches, but until we do name some of the issues, I think it is very hard to address sexual abuse happening in Christian churches.
Saya akan menjawab tentang kekerasan seksual dan bagaimana peran gereja dalam itu. Gereja punya peranan, tetapi karena keterbatasan, jadi mungkin tidak terlihat peranannya. Yang perlu kita pahami adalah bagaimana, mengapa kekerasan seksual violence ini, kekerasan seksual ini terjadi. Perlu kita pahami bahwa dalam konteks gereja-gereja Asia, otoritatif itu menjadikan figur yang segalanya. Kadang-kadang itu diberikan kepada kita, jadi tidak melalui suatu proses, kadang-kadang karena proses hubungan kekeluargaan mungkin. Lalu juga ada peranan dari para umat yang memuja para pemilik otoritas ini. Nah, sekarang terjadi ketika para otoritas ini mulai abuse their power, jadi menyalahgunakan kekuasaan mereka, sehingga mereka menjelma jadi sebuah sosok yang menanamkan sesuatu dengan penuh kekerasan. Jadi akan ada dua otoritatif di sini. Yang kalau kita lihat di dalam Alkitab akan ada yang mereka yang kalau Anda tidak mendengarkan saya akan saya hukum. Sekarang kita perlu mempertanyakan kembali hubungan kita dengan Tuhan. Apakah kalau Anda tidak berdoa, apakah Tuhan akan menghukum Anda? Apakah itu sosok Tuhan yang kita bayangkan selama ini? Jadi kalau misalnya Anda tidak berdoa, tidak melakukan, Anda akan mati, akan dimusnahkan oleh Tuhan. Nah, sebetulnya kalau kita lihat di Perjanjian Baru bagaimana Yesus menyikapi dosa ini, dosa sebagai sesuatu yang salah. Jadi beliau bergeser untuk datang ke dunia ini untuk memulihkan hubungan kita dengan Tuhan. Jadi restore our relationship with God. Jadi sekarang perlu kita pikirkan, lalu bagaimana dengan seperti itu? Kita perlu memberikan edukasi yang baik kepada semua anggota gereja, anggota jemaat, dan apapun itu tentang apa itu power, kekerasan seksual. Jadi daripada memberikan suatu excuse, contoh tadi yang diberikan adalah dalam Alkitab ada cerita tentang Raja Daud yang sebetulnya dia memperkosa Batsheba. Tapi karena kita menutup-nutupinya seolah-olah ya itu raja bagaimana, itu hal yang biasa. Nah, dalam konteks sekarang ini perlu kita pertanyakan, daripada kita sebutkan dari alasannya, daripada kita memaklumi alasannya, sebutkan kejadiannya. Jadi ini mungkin pendekatan yang cukup berisiko ya, apalagi dalam konteks gereja Asia di mana sosok pemuka agama ini menjadi sosok yang sangat-sangat otoritatif.
Okay, thank you. Is there any addition from Dr. Holt?
Okay, maybe what I can add is that aside from like letting the perpetrator of violence go, especially when we forgive easily, because we think that's the role of the church, right? That's our role as Christian. We forgive easily, but I remember listening to a video, watching a video while doing my doctoral studies, that there was this rapist who actually blamed the church for letting him continue to be a rapist because he was forgiven easily, and I was very struck by that.
It's a Korean film called The Secret Sunshine, right?
Ah, really? It was it was in English, and
so it is a Korean film called The Secret Sunshine that got award in Cannes or Berlin or something.
Oh my goodness. So this is how they see it, right? The church forgives easily, the Christians forgive easily, so they can do it again. I mean, they will be forgiven on Sunday, they can do it on Monday. So that kind of thing. So we need to do something about grace and forgiveness also. How do we convey grace and forgiveness? That's for the perpetrator. Now for the victims, we also very easily just say, oh, take it to the Lord in prayer. Oh, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So we just make things so easy. I think the church needs to make a shift from that. Because love is not really like that. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoice in the truth. that's the correction to that verse about enduring everything, bearing everything, believing and hoping everything, even lies, even undeserved suffering and undeserved pain. Why should love be like that? So I think the way we interpret and understand scriptures must really transform the way we live and relate to each other. And in terms of ethics, yeah, we need to talk more about ethics too. Like ethics is really like making good decisions, the right and good decisions rather than the wrong and the bad decisions. So how do we discern that, and so that we can act on that? That's ethics for us.
Thank you, Dr. Hope. And I'd like to add, oh, this is my family business also, yeah, Miss Fanny? Please interpret that one also, so that it will be included Mrs. Elista's questions, please.
Oke, saya mau berbagi cerita dari video yang pernah saya tonton. Di situ ada seorang pelaku kejahatan pemerkosaan yang menyalahkan gereja. Mengapa? Karena dia mendapat pengampunan. Jadi pengampunan itu ketika dia melakukan aksinya, dia dimaafkan di hari Minggu, berarti dia boleh memperkosa lagi di hari Senin. Jadi itu yang dibawa terus. Nah, dari sebuah video ini, nah ini yang perlu kita sadari bahwa harus ada suatu penyampaian pesan yang tepat kepada mereka-mereka pelaku kejahatan atau pelaku kriminal ini tentang arti kata grace, rahmat dan pengampunan, forgiveness. Nah, kepada para korban, mungkin gereja perlu bergeser ya dari hanya memberikan dukungan seperti serahkan semua pada Tuhan, berserah, kita harus menanggung, tidak seperti itu. Karena love does not rejoice in wrongdoing. Jadi cinta kasih tidak bersuka cita dalam semua hal-hal yang jahat. Nah, ini perlu diperhatikan karena ini yang perlu disampaikan dengan hati-hati ke umat. Jadi sekarang yang terakhir adalah tentang etika. Daripada kita mencari benar atau salah, true or false, tapi mari kita mencari yang baik atau yang buruk. Jadi ada kadar moral di situ. Terima kasih.
Okay, terima kasih. Thank you, Miss Fanny. And then we are going to the last question in the chat box, and I think I'd like to address it firstly to Dr. Hope. For grassroots communities in the midst of poverty, trauma is not the main thing because their energy is all used up to survive. When parents have to earn money for their children's life from morning to night, even having to work away from home, it is difficult for them to carry out their function as educators for their children. Does trauma become more important in the middle of the upper class people family who have more stable economic life? I'd like Prof. Hope to start, and then Prof. Lee will add it up.
I don't think there is a correlation to the socioeconomic status of people, because even the poor, and I see another person's comments there about how sexual abuse happens, domestic abuse happens now that the homes are everybody is working from home, right? And so everybody is at home. And there is a rise. I also heard this from Arta Wachana, a webinar, that there is a rise in the incidence of sexual abuse, domestic abuse, because the people are just staying at home together. So I don't think it is correlated to socioeconomic status of people. In fact, it could happen even more when there is poverty and lack of education, probably, and lack of empowerment to resist these efforts. So I think it happens when people are just put in a situation where they're always together. There's no distance from each other. And then, of course, the lack of respect for the human body, for the people who are even related to them, right? Or unrelated to them. It can be friends, close friends. I think it happens where there is a need, there is a lack of consciousness in terms of responsibility and accountability for each other. And so we need some education in terms of that. I was sort of hinting at that in this Christian education in the home. But again, this needs a lot of training, a lot of education and empowerment, because not all of us are able to sometimes even just articulate and name the problem. When we see advances, for example, the beginning of the sexual abuse, how do we prevent children in terms of resisting that and even identifying that these are signs? So we have a lot to do in order to prevent this sexual abuse or domestic abuse from happening, especially in the situation now when families are pulled up together. And how do we instill this respect for one another, respect for God's image in each other, and respect for the body? That's how I would respond to that.
Thank you.
Saya terjemahkan. Pertanyaan sudah ada di chat box, akan saya jawab bahwa tidak ada, menurut saya tidak ada korelasi antara trauma dengan keadaan sosial ekonomi. Sebetulnya keadaan ini mungkin terjadi karena mereka berkumpul dan tidak ada jarak satu sama lain. Selain itu karena lack of respect of human body, tidak adanya rasa hormat terhadap tubuh manusia. Jadi tidak ada rasa tanggung jawab untuk saling menjaga satu sama lain. Dengan demikian butuh banyak sekali training untuk mengajarkan bagaimana kita mengekspresikan, menyebutkan, atau bahkan menghindari dan mengidentifikasikan tanda-tanda munculnya kekerasan seksual dalam situs keluarga. Dan yang lebih penting lagi, bagaimana kita menanamkan rasa hormat itu, rasa hormat terhadap citra Tuhan di dalam keluarga. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I totally agree with what Hope said. What classism that does. I mentioned the poverty as one of the possible source of a trauma. So when middle class people can address a trauma that they notice, but the lower class people trying to survive do not even have a time, because their every energy, as a question said, is given to their survival. But in the meantime, that not only the certain trauma that their family or children go through, but the added trauma because of this lower economic status by social structure, that even no matter how long, how hard that they work, some people just cannot make their ends meet. It is a structure issue, social structure issue. So that is also added trauma, or cause of a trauma, I should say, and so. It's possible that the class can cause even deeper trauma, but people are not even aware.
Oke. Saya tambahkan, sebetulnya kalau kita bicara tentang kemiskinan adalah salah satu penyebab dari trauma. Yang membedakan di sini adalah kadang-kadang yang keluarga kaum menengah ke atas punya cara untuk mengantisipasi atau untuk membicarakan hal-hal itu. Tapi yang kelas-kelas bawah biasanya cenderung pada kemampuan untuk bertahan dari apapun bentuk kekerasan itu. Ini karena mungkin struktur sosialnya seperti itu. Jadi tidak ada hubungannya antara middle class atau pasti semua akan mengalami trauma. Yang bagaimanapun Anda akan mencoba untuk melepas, pasti semua akan ada trauma apapun kelas ekonominya. Yang membedakan adalah bagaimana kita bereaksi atau menyikapi hal tersebut.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for the answers and discussion that have been tackled together by our two wonderful professors here. So I'd like to give the opportunity, the last opportunity, to raise a question for the participants who are willing to talk directly to our professor. We encourage you to speak in English, please. If not, then we are going to close our webinar. Please, I will count 1, 2, 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. No more questions? Okay, I can see the smile in your face. I hope the perspective, values, moral lessons that have been presented for us today can be useful for our ministry, either in church or in the academic area. So thank you, Prof. Lee, for your enlightenment through your presentation, trauma-informed approach and pedagogy. With this knowledge, we will build a strong commitment to make an action, responsible action after all of us receive this knowledge from heaven. I can say like that because it is not an ordinary woman who talked to us today. God chosen one. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. And then Dr. Hope, thank you for the wonderful lesson today. What I can conclude is if there is a will, there is always a way. So in spite of lacking of resources and this and that, people who are look up to God will be helped. The one who are keep looking will be found, and they will get all the answer, and the universe will help them. Yes, ma'am, yeah? Okay, thank you. Very wonderful presentation, wonderful time, very valuable. And then I'd like to give it back to our Master of Ceremony, our wonderful students, Gracia Mongkol. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Iki Sumartina Putri Praitno. And once again, I'm Gracia Unika Mongkol as the Master of Ceremony in this international seminar. Would like to send the deepest gratitude to our amazing speakers, Reverend Dr. Boyong Lee and also Dr. Hope Anton. Thank you for all the insightful materials that we get today. And right now, we are reached the end of our seminar today. And before we close our seminar today, let us close this international seminar with prayer will be led by Reverend Iran Luji. Please welcome Reverend Iran.
Let us pray. Creator of the universe, Tuhan pencipta alam semesta, great and wonderful are your works, wondrous are your ways, besar dan indah karyamu, ajaib jalan-jalanmu. Thank you for the seminar and discussion that we have today with Dr. Boyong Lee, Dr. Hope, Dr. Iki, and students, friends, college who attend this session. Terima kasih atas seminar dan diskusi yang kami lakukan hari ini bersama para pembicara, moderator, mahasiswa, rekan-rekan yang hadir dalam sesi ini. Thank you for opening our eyes to the many ways we can heal and empower others and ourselves through religious education. Terima kasih telah membuka mata kami untuk belajar tentang bagaimana pendidikan Kristiani dapat memulihkan dan menguatkan sesama maupun diri kami sendiri. Strengthen us to live a life that is marked by love, by fierce compassion, and by solidarity. Mampukan kami untuk menjalankan kehidupan yang ditandai dengan kasih, kepedulian, dan solidaritas. Creator of the universe, hear our prayer. Pencipta alam semesta, dengarkanlah doa kami. Amen.
Thank you to Reverend Iran for the closing prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our international seminar, but it's not the end of our events. There are still panel discussion after this, and we will see you at 1 p.m. on the different links. It's on our flyer. Thank you.
I get up. Time is barely on our side.
Terima kasih panitia.
Thank you semua, thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.
See you di panel, see you.
Bye.
Terima kasih semua.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you semua.
Bye. Kak Uli. Hai.
Terima kasih, Bu.
Oh, Kak Ita, thank you. Thank you. Wah, banyak alumni ini. Thank you, Gracia. Wow, ada pendeta Iston. Thank you. Thank you.
Selamat datang di Fakultas Teologi Universitas Kristen Satya Wacana. Fakultas Teologi UKSW merupakan kelanjutan dari jurusan Pendidikan Agama Kristen dalam lingkup Fakultas Keguruan Ilmu Pendidikan UKSW. Fakultas Teologi secara resmi menyelenggarakan program Sarjana Muda Teologi pada tahun 1969 yang kemudian dikembangkan menjadi program sarjana lengkap pada tahun 1974. Fakultas Teologi UKSW berkomitmen untuk menjadi yang terdepan dalam mengembangkan ilmu teologi. Untuk itu, Fakultas Teologi UKSW selalu mengikuti perkembangan teknologi dan perubahan kehidupan di masyarakat. Kampus yang hijau menjadikan lingkungan Fakultas Teologi UKSW sangat kondusif untuk kegiatan belajar mengajar. Meskipun terdiri dari berbagai macam latar belakang mahasiswa, namun diskusi interaksi antar mahasiswa dan dosen sudah menjadi gaya dan budaya di Fakultas Teologi UKSW. Sehingga transfer ilmu dan pengalaman lapangan lebih cepat dan efektif tersampaikan. Fakultas Teologi UKSW memiliki berbagai fasilitas untuk mendukung riset dan proses belajar mahasiswa. Laboratorium dilengkapi dengan teknologi dan sarana yang mencukupi kebutuhan mahasiswa, sehingga mahasiswa dapat memperoleh keahlian sesuai perkembangan zaman. Perpustakaan UKSW mempunyai ribuan buku tentang ilmu teologi. Mahasiswa juga bisa mengakses ribuan jurnal nasional dan internasional. Selain itu, Teologi UKSW juga mempunyai riset yang sangat luas. Sistem informasi dan administrasi Fakultas Teologi terintegrasi secara online, sehingga mahasiswa mendapat pelayanan yang efektif dan efisien. Fakultas Teologi memiliki banyak publikasi dan penelitian dosen. Fakultas Teologi UKSW memiliki 3 program studi, di antaranya Program Studi Teologi. Program Studi Teologi berkonsentrasi pada pengembangan ilmu teologi yang kontekstual, ekumenis, dan pluralis, yang mampu menjawab pergumulan gereja dan masyarakat Indonesia. Program Studi Magister Sosiologi Agama. Program Studi Magister Sosiologi Agama merupakan salah satu program studi terbaik di Indonesia dalam hubungan agama dan masyarakat untuk membentuk komunitas manusia yang pluralis, kreatif, kritis, dan berwawasan luas. Program Studi Doktor Sosiologi Agama. Program studi doktor di bidang sosiologi agama membentuk komunitas manusia yang beriman, berkepribadian sosial, toleran, pluralis kreatif, inovatif, untuk kemajuan pelayanan dan pembaharuan masyarakat, bangsa, dan dunia yang bebas dari penindasan dan pengkotak-kotakan. Ketiga program studi di Fakultas Teologi mempunyai akreditasi A untuk program studi teologi dan juga program studi Magister Sosiologi Agama, dan terakreditasi B untuk program studi Doktor Sosiologi Agama. Fakultas Teologi UKSW memiliki banyak fasilitas yang menunjang bakat dan minat mahasiswa. Terdapat beberapa unit kegiatan mahasiswa, sehingga mahasiswa dapat mengembangkan hobi bakat minat di sana. Fakultas Teologi berkomitmen mencetak lulusan yang berkualitas dan kompetitif, siap menjawab tantangan di lingkungan masyarakat. Bersama Fakultas Teologi Universitas Kristen Satya Wacana, dari Salatiga, Jawa Tengah, Indonesia, membawa kedamaian dunia.